New Orleans has a food that's technically illegal to make the authentic way. Restaurants serve it anyway. Locals line up for hours. Tourists walk right past, completely clueless, ordering the one thing that actually insults the chef. What you think you should eat here? Dead wrong. You're standing in New Orleans at 2 in the morning, jet-lagged and starving, and somehow there's a line out the door for fried dough. That's the power of beignets. These square French donuts have no hole. They arrive in orders of 3, always fried fresh, so hot they'll burn your tongue if you're not careful. And here's your first rookie mistake to avoid: wearing black. One breath near that mountain of powdered sugar, and you look like you walked through a blizzard, a delicious, sweet blizzard. Café du Monde has been doing this since 1862. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They go through roughly 25 tons of powdered sugar every single month. That's not a typo. The secret to their texture? Evaporated milk instead of regular milk in the dough. Creates something denser and chewier than your typical donut. French colonists brought the recipe over in the 1700s, but it was the Ursuline nuns who actually taught locals how to make them. Now, you'll notice everyone's drinking chicory coffee alongside. That pairing started during the Civil War when coffee was scarce and chicory stretched the supply. Turns out it cuts through all that sweetness perfectly. But beignets are just the appetizer. The real soul of New Orleans cooking sits in a pot, simmering for hours. Now here's where things get serious. Gumbo isn't just a soup, it's basically a history lesson you can eat with a spoon. The base starts with a dark roux cooked for up to an hour. You're standing there, stirring constantly, watching flour and oil transform into something the color of dark chocolate. Walk away for 30 seconds. Congratulations, you just made burnt garbage. My grandmother called it the stirring meditation, though I call it the reason I have arm muscles. But here's what gets interesting. 2 versions exist, and locals will fight you over which is correct. Cajun gumbo uses oil-based roux. Creole gumbo throws tomatoes in there. Mention this debate at a dinner party and watch friendships crumble. The name itself comes from king gombo, a West African Bantu word meaning okra. That's not trivia. That's the dish telling you exactly where it came from. Enslaved Africans who carried their culinary traditions across the ocean. Then the Choctaw Nation contributed file powder from sassafras leaves. French technique, African soul, Native American ingredients, Spanish influence. 3 hours minimum to make properly. Served over rice, never beside it. And speaking of iconic sandwiches that define this city, here's the thing about New Orleans sandwiches. The bread matters more than the filling. Leidenheimer Baking Company has been making po' boy bread since 1896. The crust crackles when you bite it. The inside, soft as a cloud. Every local bakery guards their recipe like a family secret. Now, when you order, just say, dressed. That single word gets you lettuce, tomato, pickles, and mayonnaise. Listing each ingredient separately, that's how the counter person knows you're not from here. The name has a heartwarming origin. During the 1929 streetcar strike, 2 brothers who owned a restaurant fed striking workers for free. Every time one walked in, they'd shout, "Here comes another poor boy." The sandwich stuck. The name stuck. But let's talk about roast beef debris. This is the good stuff that falls off the roast into the gravy. Shredded beef swimming in its own juices, stuffed into that perfect bread. Your shirt won't survive. Worth it. A shorty measures 12 inches. The full version, up to 40 inches long. That's not a sandwich. That's a commitment. Speaking of commitment, wait until you see what happens when Spanish settlers couldn't find saffron. Here's the thing about jambalaya. Spanish settlers showed up wanting to make paella, but couldn't find saffron anywhere. So they improvised, threw in tomatoes instead, and accidentally created something better than the original. Bold claim? Maybe. But hear me out. 2 versions exist, and locals will argue about them until the end of time. Creole jambalaya has tomatoes and looks red. Cajun jambalaya skips the tomatoes, browns the meat first, and stays brown. Both camps think the other one is doing it wrong. The base starts with what locals call the Holy Trinity: onion, celery, and bell pepper. It's like the French mirepoix, except Louisiana said carrots aren't invited to this party. Now here's where it gets interesting. Unlike risotto, where you're chained to the stove stirring constantly, jambalaya cooks covered. You leave it alone. The rice absorbs all that flavorful stock while you do literally anything else. One pot feeds 20 people easily. That's why it shows up at every family reunion, tailgate, and church function. Protein, vegetables, and starch in every single spoonful. Working class families figured that out generations ago, but jambalaya is just the appetizer. Wait until you see what crawls out of Louisiana swamps next. Here's the thing about crawfish. They look like tiny lobsters, taste like the ocean had a baby with a swamp, and eating them properly requires skills no fork can teach you. Louisiana produces over 150 million pounds of these little critters every year. That's 95% of all crawfish consumed in America. One state. Basically a monopoly on mud bugs. Now, the boil itself is basically a hot tub party for shellfish. Cayenne, bay leaves, lemons, and enough Zatarain seasoning to make your sinuses file a complaint. Corn and potatoes crash the party too, soaking up all that spicy goodness. But here's where tourists embarrass themselves. The proper technique? Twist the tail from the head, pinch the base. Then, and this separates the beginners from the locals, suck the fat right out of that head cavity. Sounds gross. Tastes incredible. I resisted for years. Big mistake. Peak season runs March through June, which explains those market price tags. Some weeks crawfish costs nothing. Other weeks, your wallet weeps. The average person demolishes 3 to 5 pounds per sitting. Sounds insane until you realize most of that weight is shells. Speaking of things that seem impossible to eat, wait until you see the muffaletta. Central Grocery solved a problem in 1906 that nobody asked them to fix. Sicilian farmers kept coming in, ordering bread, then meat, then cheese, then olive salad, all separately. The owner got tired of making 4 trips, so he stacked everything together and accidentally created a legend. This thing weighs over 2 pounds, 10 inches across. You're not eating a whole one alone unless you're training for something. Split it between 2 people minimum, 4 if you've got any sense. But here's what makes it special. That olive salad sits for at least 24 hours before it touches bread. Giardiniera, capers, garlic, all swimming in olive oil until the flavors become best friends. The bread matters too. It's denser than po' boy bread, covered in sesame seeds. Why? Because regular bread would turn to mush the second that olive oil hits it. Now, mortadella, salami, ham, mozzarella, provolone. Layered so every single bite contains everything. Miss one component and you've basically failed the sandwich. The heated debate? Some want it warmed. Central Grocery says room temperature only. I tried it both ways. They're right. Speaking of comfort food traditions, there's one dish tied to a specific day of the week. Monday in New Orleans, kitchens means one thing: red beans bubbling on the stove. But why Monday specifically? Back when laundry was an all-day hand-washing ordeal, women needed a dish that could simmer for hours without any attention. Throw in a ham bone, some beans, and let the pot do its thing. Genius, honestly. That ham bone from Sunday dinner, it transforms plain beans into something magical. The smoky pork flavor seeps into everything. Zero waste, maximum taste. Your grandmother would approve. Here's a fun fact. Camellia brand red kidney beans ship over 40 million pounds yearly, and most New Orleans kitchens won't use anything else. Loyalty runs deep here. The creamy texture tricks people. There's no cream involved. Cooks just smash some beans against the pot and stir them back in. Old school technique, restaurant quality results. A bowl runs about $8 but fills you up like a $15 meal. Students and locals figured this out decades ago. Louis Armstrong loved it so much, he signed letters, "Red beans and ricely yours." When a jazz legend makes it his signature sign-off, you know it's special. Speaking of signatures, the next dish practically defines Louisiana's coastal identity. Louisiana pulls about 15 million pounds of oysters from Gulf waters every year. And here's the crazy part. Many of these oysters get shucked and served within 24 hours of leaving the water. Raw on the half shell is the classic move. They arrive on crushed ice with horseradish, cocktail sauce, and saltine crackers. You slurp the whole thing directly from the shell. One and done. But then Drago's restaurant changed everything in 1993. They invented char-grilled oysters, garlic butter, Parmesan cheese, a 600-degree grill. The result? Pure magic. Now watch the shuckers at places like Acme Oyster House. These folks open over 1,000 oysters per shift. Their knives move so fast, it's almost concerning. I tried shucking one oyster at home once. Took me 4 minutes, and I nearly needed stitches. You've probably heard the old rule about only eating oysters in months with an R, September through April. Made perfect sense before refrigeration existed. Modern cold chains have mostly solved that problem, though summer oysters do taste different. Want the best of both worlds? Get an oyster po' boy. Breaded, fried, stuffed in French bread. Speaking of satisfying combinations, shrimp and grits might be the ultimate comfort food mashup. Here's the thing about shrimp and grits. It's not originally from New Orleans. I know, but hear me out. This dish wandered over from South Carolina's Low Country during the 1980s when Southern food suddenly became fashionable. New Orleans chefs looked at it, said, "We can do better," and absolutely did. Louisiana pulls in around 100 million pounds of shrimp yearly. Brown, white, pink, each variety brings different sweetness levels to the bowl. And the grits? Stone ground takes 45 minutes compared to 5 for that instant stuff your college roommate made at 2 in the morning. The difference is like comparing a luxury sedan to a shopping cart with one bad wheel. What makes the New Orleans version special is what goes in the sauce. Andouille sausage, tasso ham, sometimes both because restraint isn't really the local style. Butter, cream, more butter. And unlike other cities drowning their grits in cheese, New Orleans keeps them simple. Let the shrimp shine. Let the sauce do the talking. Breakfast works, brunch works, dinner works. But speaking of things that work at any hour, wait until you see what happens when dessert involves actual fire. Desserts in New Orleans don't mess around. And Bananas Foster, it's basically dinner theater you can eat. Brennan's Restaurant invented this flaming masterpiece back in 1951. But here's the thing most people don't know. New Orleans was America's biggest banana importing port at the time. They needed something to do with all that fruit, so they set it on fire, obviously. The tableside show involves rum and banana liqueur hitting a hot pan. Flames shoot up 12 inches in the air. It's like watching a magic trick, except you eat the evidence afterward. One restaurant burns through 35,000 pounds of bananas yearly. Just for this single dessert, that's roughly 400 pounds every week turned into caramelized heaven. The sauce comes together stupidly fast. Butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, banana liqueur. 2 minutes, tops. I've tried making it at home. Dangerously easy. My eyebrows survived, barely. Now, worried about the alcohol? Don't be. The rum burns off completely during the flambe. All that remains is deep, warm flavor without the booze. Vanilla ice cream arrives immediately alongside. Has to. That hot sauce melts it fast, creating the perfect hot-cold contrast. Speaking of French influences, wait until you hear about étouffée. The name literally means smothered in French, and that's exactly what happens. Crawfish or shrimp get buried under a thick, seasoned sauce until they're tender and swimming in flavor. Now here's where it differs from gumbo. The roux only cooks until golden, not dark chocolate brown. This keeps things rich without that smoky depth. Different vibe entirely. You'll see both crawfish and shrimp versions on menus. But ask any local and they'll tell you crawfish is the real deal, the original. Shrimp is just the understudy when crawfish season ends. The dish actually started in Breaux Bridge during the 1920s, Cajun country creation that eventually made its way into New Orleans Creole kitchens. Smart move. And the texture? Nothing like gumbo's soupy consistency. Étouffée clings to each piece of shellfish like it's holding on for dear life. Thick, gravy-like, every bite coated perfectly. Here's the insider secret, though. Proper étouffée needs crawfish fat. That's what gives it the orange-red color and that intensified seafood punch. Without it, you're just making fancy gravy. Speaking of Cajun traditions making their way into the city, there's a sausage that takes a completely different approach to pork. All right, here's where things get a little adventurous. Boudin isn't your typical sausage. This Cajun creation stuffs pork liver, heart, rice, and enough seasoning to wake the dead into natural casings. Sounds intense? It is, but in the best possible way. And here's the funny part. You won't find boudin at fancy restaurants. Nope, gas stations sell it. Convenience stores keep it warm in little cases right next to the hot dogs. I grabbed one at a random Shell station once, and honestly, life-changing. Now, the eating technique sparks serious arguments. Some folks squeeze out the filling like toothpaste and toss the casing. Others eat the whole thing. There's no right answer, just strong opinions. The rice inside isn't cheap filler. It absorbs all that fat and spice during cooking, turning every bite into a flavor bomb. Pretty clever, actually. Want it without the casing hassle? Boudin balls deep fry the same filling into crispy, portable snacks. Festival food at its finest. Over 70 boudin producers operate within 50 miles of Scott, Louisiana. They call themselves the boudin capital of the world. But speaking of butter-drenched shellfish with a misleading name, the name BBQ shrimp is basically a lie. A delicious lie, but still a lie. These shrimp never go anywhere near a grill. Not once. Instead, they swim in a pool of butter so rich it could probably buy real estate. We're talking peppery, Worcestershire spiked, absolutely sinful butter sauce. Pascal's Manal invented this dish back in the 1950s. And here's where it gets ridiculous. The original recipe allegedly called for 2 full sticks of butter per serving. Per serving! My cardiologist just felt a disturbance in the force. Now, the shrimp arrive head on and shell on. This isn't fancy dining where everything comes pre-peeled for your convenience. Nope. You're getting messy. Really messy. Restaurants hand out bibs because that butter sauce will absolutely destroy any clothing it touches. I learned this the hard way wearing a white shirt. Once. The flavor comes from black pepper, not smoke. Tourists expecting Texas-style barbecue leave confused but happy. And here's the part locals insist on. You gotta suck the heads. Sounds weird, tastes incredible. All the concentrated flavor and fat collects right there during cooking. But speaking of things that only appear during certain times of year, here's the thing about king cake. It's not really about the cake. Sure, it's a braided oval pastry covered in purple, green, and gold sugar. Those colors represent justice, faith, and power. Very official Mardi Gras stuff. But the real drama? There's a tiny plastic baby hidden inside. Find the baby and congratulations, you're now obligated to host the next party or buy the next cake. It's like winning the lottery, except you lose money. These cakes appear on January 6th and vanish the moment Fat Tuesday ends. Poof, gone. Bakeries won't even look at you if you ask for one in July. And here's something that might surprise you. Dong Phuong Bakery, a Vietnamese-owned establishment, makes what many locals consider the absolute best version in the city. Cultural fusion at its finest. During the 6-week season, New Orleans bakeries sell over 500,000 of these things. Many get shipped nationwide to homesick Louisiana expats who can't survive Mardi Gras without one. Modern versions now include cream cheese, praline, even boudin-filled savory options. Purists nearly faint at the thought. But speaking of New Orleans traditions with serious history behind them, there's a cocktail that started it all. Here's the thing about New Orleans cocktails. The Sazerac isn't just old. It's basically America's first real cocktail, born in the 1850s when a pharmacist named Antoine Peychaud started mixing drinks at the Sazerac Coffee House. Originally, cognac was the star, but then a grape disease wiped out French vineyards and bartenders switched to rye whiskey. That temporary fix became permanent. The ritual matters here. You chill one glass while building the drink in another. Coat that cold glass with herb saint, which replaced absinthe after Prohibition made the original illegal. Pour in the rye, Peychaud's bitters, and a touch of sugar. No ice in the final drink. Ever. That lemon peel twist? You squeeze it over the surface to release the oils, then toss it. Don't drop it in like some kind of amateur. Peychaud's bitters still get made in New Orleans using an 1838 recipe that remains secret. The Sazerac bar at the Roosevelt Hotel has a 150-foot mural and moves thousands of these drinks weekly. One cocktail, almost 2 centuries of history, and it tastes like liquid New Orleans. That's 15 foods. Now, go eat.